I think in the wake of the Hanoi summit, both sides have to review where they are and to make some important decisions. I think both sides miscalculated in Hanoi. I think the North Koreans overreached when they called for the lifting of all consequential sanctions in exchange for the shutting down of just Yangbyan or portions of Yangbyan. I think the Americans miscalculated in thinking they could simply go big and call for the complete elimination of all WMD programs and expect the North Koreans to respond positively to that. So I think now has to be a time of reevaluation to figure out the best way forward. And it's going to be hard for both sides. It's clear that both North Korea and the United States have differing definitions of complete denuclearization. The United States has a kind of classic definition. It means that North Korea would have to give up all of its nuclear weapons, its fissile material, its production capabilities, and that could also extend to missiles and missile production facilities, even other weapons of mass destruction, including biological and chemical weapons. That seems to be the Trump administration definition, and we're told that President Trump actually handed a piece of paper to Chairman Kim with the U.S. definition of denuclearization. But U.S. officials were asked whether North Korea agreed with that definition, and they said no. The North Koreans are calling for the lifting of all sanctions imposed by the UN Security Council after March 2016. Those are the most consequential sanctions. They involve a ban on the export of key commodities, coal, iron ore, seafood, textiles, and so forth. And those sanctions resolutions also cover imports by North Korea of crude oil, of refined petroleum products, and lots of other things. So those are the major sanctions. And we know that those sanctions are having a significant impact on North Korea so far. But yes, the North Koreans are under pressure, but are they under sufficient pressure to get them to denuclearize completely? I don't think so. Well, clearly the Trump administration is reluctant to make exceptions in the sanctions for the Kaesong industrial complex as well as for the Kumgang Mountain tourist project, for the reason you mentioned, that these will be ways of earning hard currency for the North Korean regime. However, at the same time, we know that America's South Korean ally, the government of Moon Jae-in, would like very much to see exceptions made for those two projects. So I would imagine that if the North Koreans were prepared to take meaningful steps toward denuclearization, I think it might be possible for the Trump administration to grant exceptions for those projects as a favor to its South Korean ally, but also because those are relatively discrete projects, and they would not be as consequential as, for example, removing the ban on exports of coal. You know, the gap is very wide. Yeah. One approach would be to return to the idea of a small deal. Yangbyan, the major facilities at Yongbyon in exchange for a relatively modest package of corresponding measures, which might include an end-of-war declaration, establishing liaison offices in each other's capitals, perhaps some humanitarian assistance, and maybe some exceptions to the sanctions to permit inter-Korean cooperation, such as the Kaesong Industrial Complex. If you ask me what kind of action I would be looking for, I would propose an action that they not take. I'd suggest that they not make statements, such as the statement that Chae Son-hee made last Friday, which is that Chairman Kim has to decide whether or not to continue the moratorium on testing and whether or not to continue these negotiations. I know that the motivation of such statements, the motivation is to try to pressure the United States into making concessions. But I think such statements can backfire.